Well, welcome to my cellar for the gazillionth time. Here we are. COVID's getting worse. People are still being idiots about masks and distancing. Want to know why can't we all go crab at a bar, get drunk together, and then get COVID together? Thanksgiving's coming up, and my wife and I have made the decision that because there's 12 of us, and Ohio is recommending no more groups than 12, and the fact that I would just be sick at heart. So we've canceled all getting together for Thanksgiving. Sucks big. All right. On to other things. I got a couple of personal requests. Anybody that reads, yeah, if you read this one, anybody that listens to this, I got two things. Number one, I'm playing a game online called Vikings Clan Wars. It's by Plarium, Plarium Games. How the hell do I save? I've had it running either up or down on the taskbar for 3 days now, and I don't know how to save it. So I guess I get that for not reading the rules before I just jumped in with both feet and got hooked. Second question. I sprayed some Reaper miniatures with Tamiya Fine primer, and it sucks because, well, it's not what I want for this application because it has a slick surface. As I explained a few back, you can use that slick surface for certain effects, but that's not what I want. My question is this: what do I dump these in that'll take the primer off and leave the figures? So if you can help me on that, somebody, put it in the comments. If you know my Facebook, drop it in a private message. I would be very grateful. Thank you. All right, let's start. And this is a great one to start with. As a woman, how can I get a marvelous beard like that? Well, I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that. Number one, you'll notice I trimmed it all down. I got tired of the fact that the mask was making it curl up on the end. So I said to hell with it and broke down and trimmed it for the first time since April. Well, maybe not April, but a while. Pardon me. It was productive. And someone else replied and suggested super glue. No, I don't think that. It won't be marvelous like this. Short of some sort of hormone therapy, I really can't answer that question with any degree of confidence. But thanks for the compliment. The only trouble is, see, this side generally stays down nice and curled. This side wants to go up. So I got like half a handlebar and half a Fu Manchu. Okay, my question for a future video is, what was the core reason for gold equal XP and why XP on retrieving only and not spending? Okay, that's a very good question, and I don't know that I've ever been asked that before, certainly not on the video. XP for gold was what you overcame to acquire it. Okay, keeping in mind the beginning of the game, dumb farm boy, but still a cut above the rest of the farm boys who didn't see anything besides the hind end of an ox pulling a plow. You went through stuff to get it. And so, therefore, it was a convenient scale, rule of thumb, that you didn't just find 100 gold pieces lying on the ground. You had to do something to get it. Now, early on, when the early DMs, of which I was one, didn't quite understand the tables, and there were some really stupid jackpots in some of the early ones. Yeah, that was a little out of whack. Also, I think Now I don't do it because of the fact you can hit it big and find something stupidly valuable without much effort, because that can happen. So I don't generally do an award like that anymore. I would generally, and make a blanket award for what transpired that night, good decisions as a group, etc., etc. And if somebody had a really brilliant idea that the group agreed on and it worked out incredibly well, all shared in the experience and the yield. But the person who had the great idea, I'm sure, got a few attaboys or attagirls for it. But that was the rationale. You had to. You obviously went through something. I mean, look at it as wages. If you were a greenhorn at breaking horses and hired on as a horse turd shoveler and worked your way up to where you were making a wage, you did something for that wage. Sort of the same here. You found a jackpot, but it took you some doing to get there to get it. There it is. Spending, well, spending should have penalties in terms of the campaign. When a group comes, has a successful haul, and when I say successful haul, it all depends on your economy. How is your economy structured? I'm of the 1880s, 1890s economy where 50 cents, five silver, got you a really nice meal. 20 cents, got you a beer and a sandwich off the end of the bar. And when you're in that kind of an economy, and all of a sudden a half a dozen adventures come in just flush with cash, prices are going to go up. They should go up as they did during the California gold rush. Look at that. Just Google inflation during California gold rush and see what happened. What the cost of a single egg went up to. Supply and demand, but also it's how you understand M, which is all the currency in circulation, etc. And so I never worried about giving them lots of gold. I just ate it up with expenses and inflation. And they didn't need much help from me because they usually went and spent it extravagantly. But I also let them buy better weapons. We'll talk more about equipping and making groups competitive later on a different question, but it hits on the same topic. Could it have been if you just wanted to jump to the next level instead of buying weapons? But I'm just a player. Okay. Yeah, that was part of it. Buying weapons, it's not like leveling up consumed the gold. You still had the gold to buy the weapons with. It was experience, savvy, more knowledgeable in the ways of your world. Do you have a mechanical city town in your world? I like the idea of gnomes doing mechanics with gears, rings, steam, and magic. I'm sure the gnomes have golems for guards. Well, I don't use steam. I don't do steampunk, except in novelties. And a couple of times I've created an artifact that ran on steam. But that was kind of magically produced. Um, I share your commitment to gnomes as the tinkerers. I have a huge, enormous city that I painted with a PC program called Age of Magic, and it's city state of the overlord size, big, and it has districts and neighborhoods and quadrants and whatever. And if you want mechanics and you want tinkering, you want something fixed, you go to the gnome quarters. That you go where the gnomes hang out. And yeah, I like that idea. A mechanical city itself, no, I've never done that, and I'm not inclined to now because that would involve running a new adventure, and I've got so many other ones that are just in need of a bit of buffing up that I could publish, that I'm not interested in writing any new ones right now. Maybe if I get those 7 or 8 out someday. We'll see. I've got 2 hanging fire right now because of the economy. All right, what comes up next? And as for the gnomes having golems, golems are, unless you're talking about an iron golem or a copper golem or something like that, the original golem is a Jewish construct made from mud. I don't know what affinity gnomes have for mud. Anyway, just an aside. All right, this is a question about fast weapons. All right, I'll state right off the bat before I get into reading it that I favor an abstract style of combat. Reduce your ability to evade my fatal blow. Reduce my ability to evade your fatal blow. How and why it comes has a minimal part in the way I do things, as I'll explain. Should a poignard, or pognon, if you're French, I don't know, the Poignard, poignard, way most of us in America pronounce it, I guess. At least that's the one I've heard the most. Be faster weapon than other daggers, since poignard will suffer less resistance than a bladed dagger, and is best used in multiple thrusts. Gruesome, I know. Yeah, no shit. What are you doing? Sneaking into the butcher shop and practicing on sides of beef? Good Lord. Personally, I think that's a little too much fascination with detail to be considered mainstream. We'll go that way. Multiple thrusts, I know, but rapid re-entries must be easier with a poignard than a dirk or another bladed dagger. I don't get into speeds of weapons, except in that I use a 0 to 9, 0 being first and 9 being last, initiative system in all the combats that I oversee. If 2 people are fighting against each other and each have a 6, then, for instance, and it comes to 6, then the one with the weapon I consider to be quicker will get first whack. But unless it's an outright kill, the other one gets its whack back right away. And that's the only time I look at that. What I might say is if you had an extraordinary strike, roll a 19 or a 20, then yeah, if the poignard did 1 to 4, I might give you a couple extra, let you have a couple extra points, or maybe an extra D4. But that's a circumstantial call that's best decided by the DM and how his campaign works. I don't get into speed of weapons except in the broadest sense. Obviously, a short sword is faster than a long sword, which is faster than a 2-handed sword. Okay, but I haven't always agreed about the axes, because that depends upon the actual axe, which has enormous variance, and the speed and dex of the wielder. So, okay, so I don't get into that kind of detail. Not on a chart or table or anything. I might do some sort of instinctive thing. But hey, I've been doing this for so long that I probably have half the rules memorized and don't realize it. Okay, if you agree or even if you don't, would you advise a speedier weapon be... How would you advise? In the mechanics, that's how. On a tie, I'd go first. On a high roll, extra hit points or extra dice. That's how I do it. I mean, if you were, sneaking up, and I'm not talking about strike from behind, but I mean, you got a chance to shove it between the ribs of this guy because all you got left is your poniard, or perhaps you're fighting two-handed, and you get a 19 or a 20, depending on how we get into that. Now, the funny thing about critical hits is they're great. The players love them when they roll them, but when you roll one on them, they lose their shit. So anyway, it's your game. That's my advice. Now, here's a person that I have commented back and forth with for a while on Facebook. And she is an interesting individual, and this perhaps would explain some of it. And I believe this is when we were talking about voluntary defenestration and, voluntarily taking the damage. As an 8-year-old child, I would jump out of the second-story window like Superman, hit the backyard, roll onto my feet, run back into the house on the second floor back porch, and do it again. And I did this for hours. My first question would be where the hell were your parents? Or bigger brothers? Or sisters? Anyway, I discovered that umbrellas just invert. Well, yeah, I'll bet that was a surprise. And a blanket tied at the neck just choked. But when I tied it to my wrists and ankles, I could glide all the way to the garage and hit my head on the garage door before I hit the ground. So now you sound like Rocky the Flying Squirrel. Well, we all had our different childhood activities and favorite things to do, didn't we? I think I ought to sit up. I look like I'm taking a nap. And yes, that is a Total Con shirt I'm wearing tonight. And I know that's the next con I'm going to miss. And it breaks my heart. So if you guys are out there watching, howdy. Sure, I'm going to miss not seeing you again this year. Let's see. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed doing that. Of course, as an 8-year-old, I'm sure I did a whole lot of silly shit too. Okay, now here is one of the more bizarre questions I have gotten recently. And without getting salacious, I'm going to address it. Because I think, well, dear Tim, question. If a dwarf and a giant love each other very, very much, can they make a baby? Question. Would their offspring be a giant dwarf or a dwarf giant? Question. What the heck would that look like, and what would be its stat block? Pardon me. I really worry about people that sit around thinking this stuff up. Because I was never in really a bunch of that half this, half that stuff anyway. So let's look at this from a curmudgeonly point of view. Number one, how did a dwarf and giant fall in love? Did the giant have the dwarf in a little cage and hang it on a hook and feed it pieces of meat every day? I'm sure the dwarf didn't have the giant in a cage. Can they make a baby? Not knowing the chromosomal count of dwarves or giants, I'd be willing to bet no. I promise not to get salacious. I'll simply say this. No matter the size assignment v. sex, male giant, female giant, male dwarf, female dwarf. This is one of those times when common sense would say no. However, it's a fantasy game. It would all depend on how graphic your group gets. Would it be a giant dwarf or a dwarf giant? Well, it'd be hard to tell, wouldn't it? If a normal dwarf's 4 feet tall and a normal giant's 12 feet tall, and it's the kid's 8, well, it's a little giant or a damn big dwarf. Does it make a difference? Well, one of them's a little better at detecting slopes, but the other one makes slopes. What would it look like? Well, it might be 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide. Big and blocky. I don't know. Could be 8 feet tall and skinny as a rail. Just got big legs. Come on. I am truly amazed at the imagination. I hope that's what it is. Here's a question for you, Mr. Kesk. I'm playing BX D&D with some newer players. I have some really liberal character generation rules as I want them to feel heroic. Do you think the 4d6 drop lowest, assign in any order, max hit point level 1, and free 13 in any status too much? I'm not exactly sure about the max hit point level 1. And then there was an answer, a reply or two to this, which I found very interesting this past one, because there were several very well thought out responses, much too long for me to read here. Okay. I believe that you should use whatever character generation system within old schoolish feelings and be an basic and expert. I believe those are Frank's books. Okay, nothing crazy. When we rebooted in Carbondale after those first 7 or 8 intensive weeks of playing 2 and 3 times a day, and realizing as we went along how many mistakes I'd made, and we rebooted, we kept the characters. They were up to 2nd and 3rd and 4th level by this time. When somebody died, we didn't make them come back as 1st. When they were all still down around that, we used an average die. And if there were no 5s, 5th levels in the group, and you rolled a 5, then you were a 4. You couldn't be the best, but you were never the worst, because there was no 1. No 1, no 6. And the other thing was, if everybody else was still at 3 and 4, and you did get the 5, no, you had to be a 4. And so we did that. We also used average hit points. If they were 4d6, they got 14 hit points to start with. All right, I had to think a minute, sorry. Whatever your group feels right. It feels right, especially in newer groups. You want to, as a DM, you want to maintain the enthusiasm. You don't want any of your players to feel it's hopeless now. They're a puke, and everybody else is feeling good about themselves. I'm not saying give them the moon, but give them a running start. I think that's fair. And however you generate the numbers, as long as you are giving them commensurate challenges, not if it makes them overpowered. Because then that balance scale swings the other way. Bloop. Oh, that's the one you can't see. Bloop. I guess I do it that way. I keep forgetting which one. However, whatever feels good. Give them the average give them average hit points for whatever level they get on the average dice or whatever means you use. Now, if everybody in your group's 7 and 8, then you got to think about that. And what, as a DM, it's up to you to keep the interest going in the game. Now, if somebody's 7th level character gets croaked, I don't have a problem. What I might do, let me put it that way, what I might do is say his cousin has come out. And trying to find him to let him know that the patriarch died or whatever, and finds out he's dead and says, well, I'll join the group. And you get him back in, and maybe they're all 7s, and you'd let him in as a 5 or 4. Roll a 6-sider, even 4 odd 5, something like that. It's best, I think, to keep long-term interest in your group and in your campaign, that they should all be somewhat competitive. Now, if someone does really well and starts outstripping the group, and they see it, you're not going to have anybody feeling bad about it. Yeah, and you lucky duck, you did it again. Like our guy Hobbit. I mean, he made every saving, and he made him right out in front of everybody. I mean, there's no suggestion whatsoever that it wasn't all on the up and up. He was just the luckiest SOB we had in the whole damn group. Then he ended up writing a couple of player character types, PCs. Let's see. Yeah, I talked about that before. But yeah, he did. Doug Schwegman. Let's see. Free 13. Hey, that's fine. Make sure they got at least one. That way they can have it in their primary stat of what they want to be. I think that's great. I think it makes for a viable character. Viable being the key word, not equal. Viable. They'll work harder. And remember, when you're passing out passing out experience at the end of wherever you stop to pass it out, and if this person pulled their weight with all these other persons, then there's no reason they can't, make a little extra. However you want to work it so that the other players, yeah, come on, Bill, get back in here. Come on, Julie. Yeah, sure. We don't want you going home. Whatever. No, it may not be that night. But I have no. Why would I? I want everybody to play. Speaking of which, 2 of my doctors now have complained about HIPAA because they have other patients that are gamers and they can't say, well, yeah. Anyway, and the person, another one goes on to say, if they're matching in power, why not? If, however, they're fighting hobbit toddlers in the Creche of Terror, then they might get bored of weak opposition. Perfect. Yes. Good comment. And he said, and another one goes on to say, aside from the free 13 in any stat, that's how every game I ever played back in the 80s worked for starting stats. In fact, a lot of cases we started at 2nd level rather than 1st. Yeah, and back in the old days in the 80s when it was a big deal going from 1st to 2nd level and then on to 3rd, the gap between 3rd and 1st was an immense chasm. Okay, now on to another ludicrous question. No offense intended to the questioner. Do you think a Robin Hood character could do trick shots with his arrows? Reflecting them off walls, multiple arrows at once, blindfolded, underwater to surface shots, etc. Sure, if it's an NPC. Under no circumstances in any other case, unless it's an NPC. That's just silly stuff. That's Hollywood crap. No offense to you, but you asked my opinion. No, that's Hollywood crap. Okay, funny you mentioned Monopoly. I'm betting work that 90% of all people do not even play the game in close to the written rules. Yeah, many assume the common house rules are standard and shocked to read the extra rules. Almost a different game. It is. And it's funny, we talked about Monopoly, and in the interim, I read a piece about Monopoly. Monopoly was originally called something the landlord game. It went through several cities before its publishing, and where there were several slightly differing versions. And then the guy who got credit for selling it to Parker Brothers, I guess. I think it was first. He played a version, cleaned it up, wrote the rules, and successfully sold it to somebody. It was kind of a people's game. Underwent a couple different name changes. And you're right about the house rules. One of the reasons I don't like Monopoly is if you play strictly by the rules, you have to play with at least 4 people. Otherwise, the buy it or it goes at auction for stupid prices rule kills the game. My opinion. Anyway, there is no such thing as free parking, which has bailed many of our sorry butts out of a bad game of Monopoly. But there is no such thing. It's not a rule. Somebody house ruled it and it spread. Okay, now this one is from, I know who this person is and I count him as one of my good friends. Not only did Gary not want magic users to run roughshod, and this person, by the way, has had occasion to know what he speaks. Not only did Gary not want magic users to run roughshod over the game, his development of the game from Greyhawk Succulent through Unearthed Arcana was a constant effort to beat back the power of them. Variable weapons damage, exceptional strength, expanded hit dice, magic resistance, and weapon specializations. All of these sought to emphasize the sword over sorcery. And he goes on to say, one I concur with, by the way, as do I. I'm much more about the swords than the sorcery. The sorcery's fun, but only, in my opinion, only to play as an NPC trying to be the bad guy or the occasional helper. But anyway, yeah, and that's that Gary did it consistently. That was his ideal. 18. Oh man, Vikings is doing something again. I have it down on the bar. I'm afraid I don't know how to save. I didn't expect you to reply. Oh, to the last one. All right. Apparently, we hit a big raw nerve last week. I had no idea how raw it was. About safety at the table. And safety tools, codes, whatever. And we got a lot of commentary on that. A whole lot of commentary, both for and against. And without, I don't want to insult anybody, but there were some comments that looked like they were written by a social worker, and there were some that were written by prison's crew. We had both sides of this. Oh man, I'm not in the middle again, am I? I gotta move over this way. So you see both hands. We have both sides of this argument, and whether or not you need it, and how the game can veer off into uncomfortable territories or whatever. As I've said for many years now, I've done that little thing at the beginning of my games. At conventions, I don't know who they are. As I said earlier, a couple, 3 times where we've had a real adult night with Wheel of Blame, it was always following the cues of female players in the game. And that's fine. I enjoy playing a game with grown-ups. I enjoy doing a little tee-hee-hee and a little leering once in a while. I don't always instigate it. But like Groucho Marx, I might drop something out there and then flip my eyebrows up and down a couple times. And if it doesn't work, I don't do it again. But, okay, so a couple of the replies were really upset that this document that the consent in gaming that somebody puts in their games, like they're trying to be... Well, this week I got accused of being a racist because I used the word woke, and I was accused of being a misogynist. And I pointed out that over half my family is African American to one degree or another. And I've been married to the same woman for over 50 years now. So, and I, I got a daughter. Anyway, but because I use the word woke, so I'm going to make up my own references here. This newly discovered extremely puffy cloud of sensitivity that is now trying to settle over the gaming industry. They're upset that it should even be there. One side of the argument arguing that if they're in your group, you probably know them all better already, well enough already to know where you could and couldn't go. And if it's in a group, that's played together for a while and become friends, that those things are easily resolved. Okay, if we accept that argument, I guess that leaves pickup games. And it's my opinion that anybody that decides to run a game at a convention for strangers that isn't rather sanitized is a moron and a fool. No comedian gets on stage. Very few successful comedians are able to get up on stage and just do whatever the hell they want and be accepted for it. And I've met no DMs that have gone onto the, I won't even say the dark side, that have gone blue and successfully got away with it or developed a reputation for it anywhere except in their own groups, or occasionally if they've been doing for several years at a regional convention. And the people that sign up know what they're signing up for. And that's all good. If, however, you're signing up a game for strangers, then you don't get outrageous. Now, how far you go to deflect sensitivities, I haven't found too many vegans or vegetarians that play D&D. Well, I found some vegetarians that play D&D, but I've never had a vegan complain that we couldn't kill what was trying to eat them. I know that's an extreme example, but that's where that's what the point I'm trying to make. Another person, he says, if you join a game that you know is likely to have content that you don't like, why'd you join it in the first place? It's on you. Yes, occasionally a DM might go there. There have been a couple of kerfuffles a couple of years back about games and what they're getting into. If a player starts taking it somewhere in my game that I don't care to go, or starts making leering comments or whatever that I can see or suspect are going to make the rest of the group uncomfortable, I gently and usually with humor steer it in another direction. All right, more about here, the consent of gaming. I'm not even sure why I copied all that. Here's a good point. However, another point. It's easy to say it's common sense until you realize a lot of the things that can make someone uncomfortable are the things the villains are going to do. They're the bad guys. That's their thing. Torture, terrorism, corrupt police guard, aggression, fantasy, racism, etc., claustrophobia. Well, yeah. It's not up to you. You're not responsible if you don't know that one of the people in your group that's played for 3 years never told you about the time that they accidentally got locked in the back of the car or in the closet or whatever and now has claustrophobia. you can't know that if they didn't share it. And in some course of the adventure, they fall into a pit and they're locked in a pit. You can't know if that's going to trigger that childhood memory or not. So you can't sanitize it. Oh, you fall down a hole and land on a pile of mattresses, but the hole's big and there's windows on the way. You can't do that. So there's always going to be pitfalls out there for some individual, but it's not up to you. You're not going to do a psych evaluation on everybody that joins your group. Over the course of many sessions, you might start developing psych assessments of your players. Pardon me, getting dry. Okay, we're going on from that. Use common sense. Feel the air. I'm curious if you're DM'd or wrote an NPC, final boss, and/or supervillains in your D&D games based on historical, infamous war criminals. No. No. I see absolutely no reason to say that Pol Pot is the evil bad guy, or Hitler, or Stalin, even though, yeah, he was supposedly an ally, he was still an asshole. I'm not going to go into the depravity of the Third Reich or any of the atrocities committed by the Japanese. I don't need to do that. I don't need to use them as inspiration for something, or no. Why? Okay, now I'm quoting. I can't be the only woke fan of old school and OSR games who can't stand 3rd edition and its ilk. I've never understood the need to tie one's fandom with one's political inclinations. Players who want to be coddled aren't exclusive to or even overly prevalent among newer generations or the political left. Brats and munchkins are a constant in this hobby. It's just that Hasbro's marketing strategy is to appeal to that crowd and thus empowers them in their products. Well, that's why they hire geeks with degrees in psychology and marketing. Okay, now I don't remember if I think this came as a private message. This is my last comment of the night. I think this came in as a private message instead of a comment. And it might be a person was afraid it had already been explained before. But they asked, it was a phonetic spelling of what I say at the end of each episode. And that's Dodanagovi. That's a Cherokee word. And its form is a farewell to multiple individuals, not just one. They made a distinction. Goodbye, you all. That's goodbye, you all. Or all of you. I'm not saying a Cherokee had a southern accent or speech patterns, but that's what it means. All right, here we are. Oh, I forgot. On the 27th, 8 citizens of the United Kingdom have been sentenced to the wheel of blame. And on the 27th of this month, we're going to find out how well they do. I'm going to be running more of these. If 1 or 2 or 3 maybe between now and the holidays, and then trying to do it more frequently thereafter, because I think we're going to be doing this a while. The infection rates are up, the death rates are up, the emergency rooms are overfilled, they're running out of ventilators again. Sound familiar? And an Old Testament God would say, that all those Republican states that defied the best advice of the CDC and Dr. Fauci are now reaping the fruits of their folly. And I know it's also in other states that aren't, but that's all further I'm going to go with that. We're still seeing if baby Donnie is going to give up his playpen or put us in a war. We're not sure which. I certainly hope somebody is watching him and the football. And I certainly hope that they're able to talk him out of doing anything stupid in the Middle East between now and the time they finally drag him out. Wear a mask. Don't go to monster things this Thanksgiving. Don't. Please don't. I'm greedy. I want you all coming back and watching this thing and trying to get my numbers to grow. I also don't want anybody that's interested in what I got to say. It's probably a pretty interesting person. I don't want you to get sick and die. Wear a mask. Cough in your elbow. Wash your hands a bunch. Stay safe. Have a good Thanksgiving. It's not going to be happy at my house. But Cheryl and I will get by, and we'll probably FaceTime with the kids or Zoom them or something like that. So, Dodada Gobi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard grave. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.